to 7. But tonight with the discussion and questions and everything regarding the budget for 2020-21, and with the reports from our subcommittees, I thought I would extend it out a half hour just in case we needed that. But good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Tuesday, June 30th Community Open Forum. This evening, we will update you on the school district budget development process for the school year 2020-21. And we will also review the work of our 7 subcommittees that are preparing for the reopening of our school district in the fall. And believe me, that is not a small task. And our people have been working diligently for weeks now to put the plan together that I've asked for it to be completed by July 15th. And from all indications, we're heading in that direction. And I have a check-in on Wednesday, July 8th to make sure that we're completing our work by July 15th so we can fine tune from that point all the way to the fall to make sure that we have supports for the plan that we come up with. And I've been working with principals, and principals are aware of their responsibility in relation to formulating the plan as it relates to their building, which supports the overall district plan. So I'm very excited for all this to get going, and I have tremendous confidence in our people to make sure that we start schools on the right foot. So on that, I would like to start with Brenda, and maybe you can give us just an update on what's going on in relation to the $9 billion deficit that the state is going to be experiencing over the next 3 years, and what we're dealing with. And it's kind of an unknown situation right now, but the state is telling us that we're going to have 96 or 97% of our budget intact based on the state constitution, but we have not received any verification of that. So I'm going to turn this over to you, and you can kind of give an update in terms of where we are at this point in time.
Okay, feel free to jump in when you want to, Alex, too, because you always have some good stuff that you think about. So in relationship to the funding that we're going to receive, I received an email today with some COVID guidance on reopening of school, and I found a line that was quite interesting in there related to that. It talks about the funding for the 2021 school year. And it says, asks if you'll be funded. It says yes, but it also says OSPI does not anticipate a reduction of state appropriated funds, but OSPI cannot guarantee anything that is directly subject to legislative authority or future consideration. So I thought that was leaving it wide open for us to figure out what's going to happen to the school district. So
and that's where we've been for quite some time, and that's why we're being very methodical in working with our school board in terms of addressing the budget for 2021. We don't want to make any hasty decisions until we actually know exactly what money we might have or we might not have. But the board and Brenda and I and Linda Arnold have been meeting every Thursday, every week. And we've come up with various scenarios just in case there's a problem, a reduction in our revenue. We are prepared to do what is necessary to initiate school in the fall of 2021, fall of 20, excuse me. So Brenda, continue on, please.
Okay. So as Alex stated, we've been meeting every Thursday with the school board to discuss different options, what funding might look like for Shelton School District. So we have several scenarios we've been tossing around every week. So we have one that is a 3.6%. That actually started out a little different, but as some tweaks happened, the percentage changed. So what that looks like for the school district our size is about $2.1 million reduction. Then we also have a 7% reduction scenario that we've looked at, and that is about $4.4 million for Shelton School District. Then we have a 10% reduction, and that's about $6.4 million for Shelton School District. A 15% reduction, and that is $9.6 million. And then we also have a 16.5% reduction, and that is about $10.7 million. So we've talked about all of those and where we might land with that $9 million deficit for the state. As Alex stated also, they say basic ed is about 97% of our funding. And our levy equalization money that we received due to passing the levy is about $3 million. That is not safe for the basic ed for the state. So that is a possibility of something the legislature could come into session at any time. We're not sure when. We're hearing they're going to come, but no definite date yet, and take that away from us. So we're trying to prepare with these scenarios to offset that type of thing. We're still budgeting our enrollment very conservatively. For the past 5 years with Alex, we've budgeted at 4,075 students. We are bumping it up a little this year to 4,125 students because we did end the year at 4,339 students. So we were well above that number. So we still believe that that gives us enough cushion in these times with the COVID. And I've also spoken to the ESD, and they believe that still is a good spot for us to budget. So I don't know. Do you want me to talk about the money that we're not saving during this time, Alex?
Well,
Yes.
there's a perception out there that we're saving money because schools are closed. And one of our board members mentioned this, and we thought it would be a good idea to review the facts in relation to that issue. So Brenda is prepared to share that information with all of us. But before we go any further, I would just like to say that the board has given me direction months ago about where we want this district to go, regardless of the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. The board has indicated to me, Alex, as a superintendent, we want you to continue the current path in terms of our academies and in terms of our programs to do the very best for our students. And the key here is that, anybody can sail a ship in calm waters. But the challenge of leadership is when things are become very challenging to continue on with the good things that are happening within an organization. And we believe we have many good things happening in our district that need to continue under any and all circumstances. So we're being very careful in terms of our discussions in relation to the budget, making sure that we don't pull the trigger too quickly in terms of various positions in our school district, because we're a people business. Without our people, programs suffer tremendously. So we're being very cautious and at the same time understanding that we need our people to continue moving our district forward. So we haven't made any announcements about specific cuts, but I can tell you this, that we have prepared, if necessary, to make reductions in staff. We don't want to do that. And I'm hoping that the information that we're getting from the state, that 97% of our budget is intact, and that the legislature is going to come back and understand that if we are to continue the momentum in our school district and other school districts throughout the state, basic education must be funded along with some of the enrichment things that we're doing in our district. So are there any questions from the community or from staff regarding what we've covered in a very quick fashion at this point?
There is nothing in the mailbox or posted to the comments section on the YouTube stream at this time.
At this time, okay. Well, we might get questions as we move through the program here. Brenda, why don't you talk a little bit about the issue where maybe some people think we're saving money during this time when we're not in session?
Sure. I've gone through reports line by line. It was actually a kind of a fun process to do, but what a lot of people don't know is that a lot of our funding is designated. It has strings attached. Anything we receive for food service, child nutrition has to be spent on that. Transportation is the same thing. You get transportation funding, it can only be spent for transportation. A lot of our grants are very similar. They have the strings attached to how you've written the grant, so you have to specifically spend that money within that. So that's a little background of how our money comes in. Food services, as you know, we've been having 4 sites open, doing meals during the shutdown. Lots of sack lunch bags everywhere in those facilities. When you go there, it's quite interesting to see. We also ran 2 buses to 2 locations. We went to Fawn Lake and to Oak Park. So what is happening there is we're not receiving revenue for paid lunches because the students that normally come and buy lunches aren't here to buy lunches. So that's a lost revenue for us. We're actually serving less meals than we normally would serve during this time. So we're not receiving as much revenue. The costs are higher for all the sacks we're having to put the breakfast and lunch in. The food is a grab and go type, so that's more expensive for us. And then we also continued to serve during spring break. That was an additional cost. We had to pay the staff and the cost of the food we don't normally serve during spring break. So right now, when I do the revenue versus expenditures, we're running about $400,000 less than what we would normally run for revenue and food services. So that is a hit to us because our costs are still there because we're still serving the meals and we're paying our staff to do that. So that's the piece on food services. Transportation, similar situation. We're paying our drivers still during this time. We did add 8 drivers this year to cover those Olympic middle school routes for those 5th and 6th graders to keep them off the buses with the high schoolers. So that was an additional cost that we had. We had a fuel drop into our tanks. We have our own gas pumps right before we shut down. So our tanks are full. And so we're running about $371,000 above the revenue we're receiving for food service or for transportation right now. So there's that type of thing. We also, all the schools have been sending out instructional packets for those students that couldn't come pick them up. We have more costs for all those big envelopes and all the postage that we've been sending out. That's averaging about $150 to $200 a week just for the postage. I'm not sure what they're spending on the envelopes. I've seen the postage because I've been running them through the meter for everybody. But so that's an additional cost we normally don't have. We also ran a daycare out of Mountain View Elementary for our first responders. There is no funding for that. So that's an additional cost to us. I haven't put numbers to that yet because I'm still compiling receipts for supplies and that type of thing. The grants, none of the carryover has been changed. We thought they might give us a little more flexibility during this time to carry over additional dollars. That's not happening. They're keeping the carryovers pretty much the same. Most of them are around 10%. Some of them don't have carryover at all. So, and then the career technical education money that does come in through basic ed that Don Wielander's program runs, that is a pretty much use it or lose it at a 95%. And it comes in every month. So if we don't spend that 95%, come September, we have to write OSPI a check back to pay it back. So nothing has really changed. They haven't allowed us any flexibility there on funding. I did look at our substitute teacher costs. This was kind of an interesting, I compared certificated staff and classified staff. We did save about $60,000 for certificated staff subs when we closed, but our classified subs were higher than normal. They were above budget by about $43,000. So that was pretty close to being a wash. So really it's costing us more money than we're losing revenue. There's no savings right now that I can find anywhere. Our utilities are running pretty much the same because our buildings are open. The teachers are coming in on certain days a week to do their instruction. And so I can't find any savings, Alex. I'm sorry.
You know, and there's something else that I want everyone to hear about, and that is that we distributed 2,500 Chromebooks.
Yep.
And we let the kids have those Chromebooks during the summer. To give you an example, if and we've had a little trouble getting those Chromebooks back from our seniors. We've got about 85 that we distributed at Shelton High School, and about 20 or so that we distributed at um, Choice High School. So out of those so far, and we've been asking for those to be returned, we've received 8. And so if you multiply $300 per Chromebook, it's a healthy sum of money if we don't get those back. And we need those in the hands of our students. And I'm pleading with our parents, our senior parents, to please encourage your sons and daughters to return those Chromebooks, because that's a deficit for us that we would have to deal with, because we would need to replace them. So our intent was to be helpful and supportive to our students by giving those Chromebooks out and distributing them out, I should say. But we need to have them returned, and then we would redistribute. But if we don't get the 2,500 back, that would be another hit for us. So please, make sure that we get those back if you're not using them, or if you're a senior and not returning. We need those Chromebooks back, please, because that will impact our budget. Now, the only other thing I would want Brenda to talk about, and please ask questions as we go through here. The COVID-19, the CARES grant, you might want to talk a little bit about that and what kind of money we're expecting, but we're in the process of determining how we can spend that money. But it's a considerable amount of money that we could possibly use to offset some of these expenses.
Yes, so our total allocation we'll receive is just right around $975,000. The OSPI has received authority to distribute part of it to us now. It's right around 800,000 I think we can get now, except we're waiting for the I-grant to be released. We have to go in and submit a grant and write a grant. Kelly's gonna help with that, I'm hoping. So we'll have to write that on how we can use the money. We have guidance on how to use the money, but until we see the actual I-grant, we're not positive exactly how we can use it. So it does mention the technology in there. It mentions professional development for your teachers to be able to do the distance learning type thing, anything to prepare for how we open schools in the fall. But we have to wait for that I-grant to get open, to get in there and actually write it so we can claim the money. So,
you know, if the state were to reduce our revenue, and you couple that with what needs to happen to prepare for the reopening of school, and let's say that we can't use this money from the COVID-19 money, the CARES money, that would put us in a very desperate situation. But my interpretation, and it's just a first review of the document, is that we can use this money for professional development, technology, for preparing and planning to reopen our schools. If that happens, that will be a huge plus for the Shelton School District, as well as other school districts across the state of Washington. But if that money is earmarked where we can't use it to reopen schools, and there's a reduction in our revenue, that puts us in a very difficult position. But depending on what that means, we have studied various options, and we are prepared at the right time to initiate reductions to meet our particular situation. But we just are hesitant to come out right now when we don't know how much money we might not have or how much money we have. We have held that back. We didn't want to upset people. We didn't want to cause anxiety amongst our staff for no reason. Okay, if there's a reason, then we have to face reality, and we would go about doing what we needed to do. But we didn't want to preempt that to any degree, and that was something that the board was very concerned about, that we didn't go out to the public and cause a ruckus when we really don't know what we need to do to meet our budgetary issues. So we're awaiting information from the state. I'm hoping that the legislature comes in early and deals with the budget as they should, so that we can plan accordingly. Anything else, Brenda, that you would like to share?
I might mention the timeline. I know Gordon Weeks from the Journal contacted me this morning and asked that question, so that might be interesting for people. We, as a district, were considered a first-class district due to our enrollment size. So our deadline, we submit the initial budget to Educational Service 113 by July 10th. And they do a review to make sure everything matches up. And then the board will actually adopt the budget the end of August at their last board meeting. We will do a first reading of the budget, the first meeting in August with the school board. So.
And we could have a special board meeting that focuses on the budget before that. So there you have it. There's a lot of unanswered questions at this time, and we're doing our very best to stay on top of things and to continue to meet, to strategize, depending on anything that may come down the road, that we will be prepared to move forward, regardless of what we might have to do. So are there any questions about anything that we've talked about in terms of the budget for 2021? I wish we had more concrete information to share, but we've been battling this for months. We don't know yet. But when we know, you're going to know. And you're going to know all the intricacies of the budget, the expenditures, the revenue. You'll know everything as a community and as the public is concerned. It's one thing about a public school budget. There are no secrets. It's out there for everybody to review, and you'll know where the money is being spent, how it's being spent, how much is being spent. It'll all be out there in black and white for everybody to see. Okay. We also, any questions, any comments from anybody? Okay.
Nothing posted yet.
Nothing posted yet. Okay, well, we have time. It's only 6:20. Well, what I'd like to do now is to invite our subcommittee leaders to give us a brief overview of their work and where we're heading. Today is June 30th. In 15 days, actually in 8 days or so, I've asked that we're going to be real close to submitting our plan to the public for everyone's review and to our staff. So I would like just maybe some highlights of the work that's been going on. We have over 200 people that have signed up for our subcommittees. That's fantastic. That's more than signed up for the subcommittees at the state level. So we've had great participation from the community and from our staff in relation to our subcommittee work. And that's really important as we do this work, that we have a collaboration and input from a variety of people. And from what I've heard from the subcommittee leaders, people have expressed their concerns, expressed their ideas, asked their questions. And what's really great is that they're sticking with these subcommittees. We're not losing people from what I've been told. So that's wonderful as we move forward. So a very important committee that we need to keep in mind under these circumstances, and under normal circumstances, this is important, but especially with the events at hand, this committee's responsibility is huge. And that is dealing with students, staff, and family social, emotional needs and support. This committee has been working on ways to support our families, to support our staff, to support our students in these difficult times. So I'm going to ask Marianne Marshall and hopefully Susie is with us, Susie Worsbicki, to kind of give us a brief kind of overview of the work that's been done to this point.
Thank you, Dr. Apostle. Susie is not here tonight. She's actually at Shelton High School handing out diplomas, but she's going to try to get in on this open forum as soon as she's available. But I will go through and give everyone an update on where we're at in our committee. Last week, we went over the survey results that was sent out to staff, students, families. And some of the hot topics that we've talked about is the need to identify supports both in the district and Mason County. We've talked a lot about making those easily accessible and what that could and should look like here in the Shelton School District. We've talked about the importance about making sure that all of our stakeholders, our students, our staff, our families, everyone is aware of what the beginning of school in the fall is going to look like. We've also talked about and explored the idea of the possibility of creating an advisory committee that encompasses not only people within the Shelton School District, students, staff, but also family members, also those out in the community that are focused around social and emotional needs. We've talked about the need to create time and space for both staff and students to be able to take breaks during the school day under these new conditions that we may find ourselves in. We talked about the importance around trauma responsive tier 1 classroom building based practices. So we talked about trainings and updates. We also know that some studies have come out recently that are addressing teacher wellness, resilience, and stress. And so we've talked about the importance around that and creating a district action plan. We've also explored and talked about contemporary cultural competence and what that would look like. We also discussed the importance of creating a building action or district action plan around that. We've also talked about screeners so that we know what supports our students, our staff, and our family needs. And if we can't offer that in the district, making sure that we're able to connect them and give them the information they needed, what is available out in Mason County. We've also talked about collaboration between building-based multi-tiered systems of supports and the comprehensive school counseling programs in each building. So that sums up the hot topics that we've talked about. Susie Worsbicky and myself met with Dr. Jessica Swain Brady. Many of the district admin know her who are working on the MTSS team. She is based out of Eugene, Oregon. And what's great about her is she has been working with school districts across the country on this very topic and working with them to discuss the importance around social emotional needs. And so we met with her. We went over our draft of our proposed recommendations, sought advice from her, asked her what she thought, and then she gave us some great advice. She also talked to us about what school districts across the country are talking about and what they are doing. So I feel really good about where we're at. And so this Thursday, we are going to meet again as a committee. We're going to go over our draft and we are going to solidify our plan and be ready for July 8th.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Mary Ann is our Executive Director of K-12 Schools. And Susie is a counselor at Shelton High School and one of our finest. Mary Ann, can you talk a little bit, can you identify what MTSS is for the people?
So MTSS stands for Multi-Tiered Systems of Supports.
Okay. And that's a program that we are training teachers and we are working with administrators in terms of providing support at each one of our buildings. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So each building in the district has their own building multi-tiered systems of support team. And we also have an MTSS team at the district. And right now our MTSS district team is working closely around the social emotional needs of each of our buildings. And we have our team members made up of that district team working with each of the buildings around action plans, identifying appropriate social emotional learning curriculum. So yes, it's a big topic here in the district and it's well embedded in each of our buildings.
So if we notice that a staff member is having difficulty, what kinds of things have you talked about in your subcommittee that we could implement to support that particular staff member or staff members?
So great questions. So today we talked with Dr. Jessica Swain Brady about that. And there are some free resources that she's linked us to about online trainings or things available to teachers to help them move through a variety of social emotional topics. So we want to make sure, again, that everyone has access. So if you have a need, identifying those needs that we have and connecting everyone, all stakeholders, whether that's in the district or outside the district, with help. That's one of the hot topics of the committee. And we're moving forward to bring that to the district and have a plan so that staff, if they are struggling with anxiety, depression, what supports are available and how to access those and make it easily accessible. So you don't have to guess on where you have to go. And it could be and making sure that all of this is confidential.
Right. And the same would apply to our students and our families as we work through the support program, correct?
Absolutely.
And what role, our counselors, I mean, they have, their plate is full, usually in normal circumstances, but how would we work with our counselors under these very difficult times to maybe reach out to students and families? Have you talked about different ways than what we've been doing in the past to deal with the situation that we're dealing with currently in terms of our counselors?
Yes, so I know that all of our building counselors have worked hard to reach out to our families and our staff members during this time with little short video clips of how to move through various social emotional issues. Again, that we are going to dive deeper with a distinct plan and recommendation on how counselors within the district should approach that. And we have counselors on our team working closely with us now. And again, that goes back to one of the things that we've been talking about on the committee about collaboration between the district's multi-tiered systems of support teams, both at the district and within the building, and a comprehensive school counseling program in each of our buildings.
And I've asked Susie to oversee that counseling plan K-12, starting immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that I was going to ask is, what about community resources and how we're working, or how have that been discussed, how we can bring the community resources into play to help us with some of these issues in our schools?
Yes, that goes back to the topic I mentioned earlier about screeners. So again, screeners for students, screeners for staff, identifying the needs. What are the needs? And like I said, if we don't have a way to address those needs here in the district, what are available out within our county? Again, that's more work that our committee has been doing. We don't have an identified screener within all of our buildings. I know Ms. Brian Worsbicky, the counselor at Bordeaux Elementary, has used a screener, but we don't have an adopted screener. And that's been a topic in our committee, like identifying, is that a need? Should we make that a recommendation that each building has a screener? That continuity, making sure that we have identifying what is needed and connecting those supports, whether that's in the district, within the community. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, define a screener for everybody. What does that mean?
So a screener would be a variety of questions, and it depends. Again, we as a committee are identifying what would be those appropriate questions and looking at different screeners to make sure that those meet the needs, and we're getting that adequate information that we need to make those decisions. So we might ask questions of anxiety, depression, attention, ability to focus, stress levels. There's a variety of questions.
Okay.
And there is a variety of screeners. We just need to make sure that if we make the recommendation that screeners are needed, that we make sure that we pick the right screener that's going to give us the information that we wanted. And that's still work that we're putting together and working on. Because again, we don't have an identified screener in the district to do that work. We would need to research and study and bring to you and the board and make that decision of what would be appropriate.
So thank you, Marianne. So the work, I just must say that the work that is being done in our subcommittees, it needs to be constantly evolving because we don't know exactly what circumstances we're going to deal with when school begins. We have a good idea, but you know, we have to have systems in place that are flexible and rather nimble as we face these various challenges that maybe we've never faced before. But the work that's being done in the subcommittees needs to take into account that we may come up with a plan, but the plan may need to be refined and adjusted as we go forward. So it sounds like we're moving in the right direction, Marianne, with this very important committee because the support of our staff, our families, and our students is going to be critical as we open schools in the fall in an environment that we've really never experienced before. And it's going to be stressful for everybody. So you have a very important part in making sure that we have, at least starting out, we have a system of support for everybody. Very good. Any
Yeah,
questions from the group?
We have a couple of quick posts. Wendy Bowles, will you schedule another community forum when you have more info? And this was posted right after we discussed the finances. And we have Karen Percy. Thank you all for informing the community. And another one from Karen Percy. Are you talking like a PHQ-9 and GAD-7 type screening tools that are used in doctors' offices? And then Kelly Bonin, what is the meeting? No, that's a meeting ID number question for joining the meeting. Sorry.
Okay. So go ahead, Marianne.
So Bob, to answer the question, are they similar to like a is it PHQ-9? Very similar, but again, what a doctor, if the information that a doctor would need may be different than what a school district may need. But there is some similarities. They're not identical.
You know, and so as we move forward, meshing these systems together so that they work and support our people is going to be part of the flexibility that we need. What was the first question again, Bob? Or the first comment?
Will you schedule another community forum when you have more info? And that was related back to the finance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll be coming back out in numerous open forums. I can tell you that. I think it's extremely important as we move forward with all of these different things that we keep people informed with the facts that we have at that particular time. So we're going to continue to reach out through open forums on our website, you name it, special board meetings, you name it, and we're going to be communicating what's happening with everybody. Thank you for asking those questions, though. Okay. Our next subcommittee, a very important one also. We're all anxious to hear the results of this work, and it's basically a subcommittee that's dealing with remote learning and the traditional model that we're used to, and basically coming up with a plan of teaching and learning that will work under these very difficult and challenging conditions. And we have a great person running that committee, and that's Kelly Neely, who is running that committee. And I think you've been at work with that committee for how long, Kelly? You're mute.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I can't even say, since we first started this, we've had this same group going and almost
Okay.
everybody attends every week. So
Yeah.
It's
And how
been
many
good
committee
together.
members do you have in your group?
we have 50 now.
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And Marianne, how many do you have in yours?
So we
Marianne?
have a total of 36. Last week we had 27 attendees.
Okay, so still a great turnout on
Yes.
both committees. Well,
Yes.
okay, I don't want to put you on the spot, Kelly, but can you give us kind of a an idea where we're heading in terms of our instructional model during these challenging times?
I can. Of course, we all wish that we could be face to face 100% the way that we left in March. But in event that we're not, we've come up with several different options that we're working on. One would be continuous learning the whole time. So if the health department, the governor shuts us down, if we decide to close completely, if COVID runs a course and hits us pretty hard again, can we go to continuous learning as quickly as we can, and will it be robust and what we need to reach our students? And we're working on that right now. The answer will be yes. It will look different than it did in the spring, but we are working on plans right now to ensure that our education and the learning that goes out to the students, if we are continuously online, is above par. We want our students to really gain learning during that time if that happens. In between those two things, coming back full-time, continuous learning, we have a blended learning model that we're looking at right now. So there was a survey that went out to both the community, parents, and then another one that went out to staff asking them their opinions on different models that we could use. And both in the staff and the community, the majority of the votes came back on the poll to have a rotating schedule if that's what we needed to go to. So that's what the committee is exploring right now. We voted on it and it was 89% in favor of the rotating schedule. So now, to make sure that we have buy-in from everybody and we hear the parents again, what is best for them and their children, and the community as a whole, do they want to go every other day? And the days that the half the students are not at school, they would be at home getting continuous online learning. And then it flips and the other side comes back. So if I'm a third grade teacher, half my class would come on Monday. The other half would be at home getting continuous online learning. On Tuesday, the other half comes back to me. Part A goes home. They do the online learning and I have the kids in front of me. And that continues throughout the week with one day in between that we would be cleaning the buildings and doing online help and support with our parents. That's one option. The other option would be in 2 days on for half my class, my third grade class. I'd have them Monday and Tuesday. The other half of the class would be home learning, continuous learning. We'd have the day off in between, not off, we're not off. The students would still be learning. We'd be doing continuous learning. We'd be having office hours for the teachers and support for the parents. The buildings would be deep cleaned during that day. And then on Thursday and Friday, we'd have the other kids back and my first group would be at home, still continuous learning. So what we're interested in now is what will work out best for the students and their learning and their parents and the care for their students if they have to be at home part of the time. One of the things that we really had to consider when we were looking at this was capacity in the buildings. So we are not in charge of what the health department tells us as far as regulations goes. We're not in charge of what L&I tells us or the governor. So we're living by the regulations that we have now to keep us all safe, happy, and healthy. So the first thing that we have to do is the masks. We're not in control of that. We've had lots of discussions about the masks. And the other thing that limits the number of kids that we have at school is a 6-foot distance between kids. So in the classroom, when they're seated, we have to have 6 feet of space in between the students and they all need to be facing forward. So that limits our capacity that we can have in the building at one time. So that brought forth these ideas of having to rotate the schedules. Again, we're going to be coming out with another short survey, probably 2 questions, maybe 3. to understand what the parents feel would be best suited for them and their children. And after we get that information back, we will move forward with recommending to Dr. Apostle and the board what it is that we think we should be doing if we have to move to blended learning. We also, one of the big questions in this group is, can we move quickly between that kind of model and a model if we get shut down again, if there's an outbreak? And the answer is yes, we're going to have to be able to. We need to be flexible. We're not in control of this virus. So we need to look at all options that we can. And of course, if we have students that are on continuous learning, they're not able to come back, or their parents don't want them to come back, we have an option for those students as well if they do not feel comfortable sending their students. So lots of different little moving parts. Mostly we're interested in getting these plans all in place so that kids, parents, community members, staff, we're all comfortable with knowing what those options would be depending on what the call is from the health department.
Yeah, very good. There's no question that this is a very challenging task that the committee is that the subcommittee is dealing with. There's no perfect model. We don't have all the answers. And when you talk about continuous learning, so we're all on the same page, could you define continuous learning?
Yes, continuous learning is basically distance learning, at-home learning for the kids. They have, we're using Google Classroom, which is what we used for the most part in the spring. So that will be our platform. Students will see live and or recorded lessons. They will have teacher hours where the teacher can Zoom with them, or Google Class or Google Meet with them during this time. So we have a variety of those things, but that's what continuous learning is distance learning.
It's distance learning. And then we have what we call the hybrid model, which you've discussed to a certain degree. And I know that the subcommittee has reviewed various models, and each model has its pluses and minuses. You know, when this all started in March, we sent out surveys to the parents to find out what their needs were. We sent out the same survey, asked students what they needed. Then we asked staff what they needed. And now we've sent out, and we've received the results last Wednesday. We sent a survey out to families and students and to teachers, to staff in general, to find out what they would like to see in terms of reopening our schools. So we're using all that information, especially as it relates to what Kelly is dealing with in her subcommittee, to come up with a plan that people, they know it's not perfect, but it's a plan that a great number of people would support. We want to do the very best for our kids and to keep them safe, to keep our staff healthy and safe. So the challenge here is tremendous. We have not been here before. And regardless of the plan, we need to be able to adapt to a changing environment. Like Kelly mentioned, you know, if the virus gets out of control again, we need to have plan A and then plan B. If the virus gets out of control, we're going to have to go to distance learning 100%. And so I've asked Kelly, and I've asked all our committees, that to prepare for this possibility where the virus erupts again, because I will just emphasize that the safety and security and the health and safety of our staff, our students, and our families is of paramount importance. And we won't give on that issue. So anything that we come up with in terms of reopening schools, we'll have that as of paramount importance on making sure our people are safe, our staff, our kids, everybody. We want to open school in the worst way. We would love to have our kids come back in a traditional sense, along with distance learning, but that may not happen. And it's important that everybody understands, as much as we want our kids in school, the health and safety of our staff and our kids is still very important, and that's impacting the decision we're making in this instructional subcommittee. Is there anything else, Kelly, that maybe that the committee has talked about in terms of another model besides the one that you've just mentioned?
We did talk about having a, like a rolling start where certain kids would come to school and other kids, mostly the secondary kids, would be all at home to try to get those other kids in and going. But that was not favored by the community or by the teachers. So we let go of that. There were a couple other things like having a morning and an afternoon session, but that doubles the busing cost. And it also really, really reduces the amount of time that you're with students. It takes more than half of their time away because of that transition time in the middle of trying to get all the students there on the buses, all the students home on the buses. So that wasn't really an option for us. The other thing that we have talked about is there might be an in-between plan. So maybe there's a time when we have so many students that are doing the online distance learning, and that would leave us enough space in the classrooms to have, meet the 6-foot
Social distancing.
distance, yes. And if that happens, then yes, we could go back to all day, the kids are there. But the minute that we get a classroom that gets over the limit, we can't have that. It has to be 6 feet. And until they change that or make that a little bit more flexible, it is what it is. So we're going to be conservative as we look at it to begin with. Make sure that we've got all of the space that we need. The students are set up. We have Robert's working on all of the sanitizing everything in between, making sure that we're following all those rules. It's just a lot to take into place. One of the things that everybody wants, not one, but several of the things that everybody wants to know, we can't really give answers to right at this very moment. We need to know what our plan is, and then all these other pieces start to form around it. So if we're going to distance learning 3 days a week and 2 days we're here, that looks a little bit different than the every other day. So we're kind of moving with it. The next step for the committee will be, once we decide what that is, we'll be breaking into separate groups. The parents and the community members and the students will be working on any barriers that they see that we can overcome before we even get there. So they're gonna be proactive about that. The teachers and the admin will be actually working on what the design will look like, what we all agree on, how it is consistent from school to school so that parents don't have to learn 15 different programs. Those are all the things that we'll be working on as we continue this work throughout the summer.
Yeah. This is, regardless of the plan, it's going to be a real challenge for our parents. And I feel bad that we're in this situation because, there are so many variables involved with parents being involved in any plan that we come up with. They've got to work. What are they going to do with their kids? I mean, this is really tough on our parents. And I just want to say to our parents and families, we're doing everything possible, keeping in mind some of the challenges that you're dealing with every single day. So if you have suggestions, get in touch with us. We want to hear from you. We want to put forth the very best program that we can under the circumstances that takes into account some of the things that you're dealing with every single day. I can only imagine some of the issues that you are contending with. I have a question very quickly, Kelly. Has the committee, and I think you've mentioned this to me, but I'm mentioning it just for the people that are involved in the open forum this evening. Have you talked about half of our students coming 1 week in duration and then the next week the other half come?
Yes, I'm so sorry. I forgot about that one. We did talk about the week by week rotation, and that was not what came back on the survey as being the one that people wanted. They wanted more of the shorter rotation. So as we put it out, that really wasn't one that we were going to look at again. We've looked at it once already. and we didn't have enough folks wanting that.
Okay.
But I did want to mention too to everyone, we gather a lot of information from everybody on the committee. My committee, as are everybody else's, are made up of all the stakeholders that we could possibly think of. We have teachers, administrators, parents, students, a couple school board members, representatives from our tribes, somebody from Gear Up. I mean, just about anybody we could think of, we have on this committee. So it's really valuable to get that input. We have a running record through the entire meeting of questions and answers and things to think about that not all of us have the same perspective on. So
Yeah.
it's super interesting that way. We also look closely at the comments that the parents and the teachers, well, mostly the parents, had on the survey, and we've taken that all into account as well. Parents were very concerned. Their number one concern was equity and reaching all students. And then they were concerned about the stress, of course, that everything was bringing about, and childcare. Childcare is a big one.
So,
And so that's one of the reasons that I'm very interested in knowing what model for rotation that they would prefer, that they think would be easiest for their family to arrange that childcare.
and then we would come forward with a possible childcare element within the plan as a possibility.
I don't know that we can do that, but I would like to form another little committee. I'm hoping maybe Jenny Lafreniere will help me with that and do outreach to the community to see what the options are, and then see about doing some linking with some parent groups
Yeah.
over it.
Jenny Lafreniere is our special ed director, and she works closely with Kelly. Yeah, childcare would definitely be something we need to entertain. It's a cost, but in terms of making things work, that may be something we need to deal with. And that should be part of the plan, or at least a recommendation. During these times, it's going to be easy to place blame and to be critical. But I think we all know these are times we've never experienced before. Not only public education, but our society in general. And they are challenging times. And we're going to make mistakes. We are going to make mistakes as we move forward. We've made mistakes getting here. We're going to continue to make mistakes, but we need to practice forgiving and moving on together, because we're not going to be perfect, folks. We're just not. We're trying very hard within our parameters to do the very best for our children, for our teachers, for our families. But, we're not going to get it right on all counts. But that's why I'm saying we need systems and programs to initiate school that we can adjust as we face these various issues. But we need your positive attitude and your forgiveness as we move forward to do the very best for our children. And I can tell you right now that the standards and expectations that we have in our district are very high. We want to do the very best to open school in the fall, if that's the case. And so we're going to continue to communicate with you. If we go one direction and we hear that, hey, people are not happy, we're going to have to come back to the drawing board and make it better. But it's not going to be perfect, folks. It's not. In any sense of the word, it's not going to be perfect. Nobody has the plan. Nobody has the model. Not the federal government, not the state government, no public school. And I deal with superintendents from all over, and they have some of the same issues that we're talking about. Not some, but they're dealing with the same issues we're dealing with. And they can get a little frustrated, like we can get frustrated, but we need to march on. And there's one reason why we need to. It's our children. And we all have to be unified in making the best effort possible. But keep in mind that it's not going to be perfect, and not everybody's going to be happy. We know that going in. But we need to stick together, and we need to communicate. If we have issues, if we're frustrated, it's very important we hear about it, and we try to correct it. We do the best that we can to make things better. This is a process of continuing to improve it because we don't have the exact system to put forth. It's impossible to do. When you have so many variables such as transportation and nutrition and safety and security and developing an instructional model and making sure that all of these things are integrated and working, it's very difficult because we've never done it before. But I'm not making excuses or alibis, folks. I'm not. I'm just saying that reality is that it's not going to be perfect starting out, and it may never be. But it's not because we're not trying to listen to you, to listen to our community, to listen to our staff, but it's not going to be perfect for everybody. But we're going to do our very best towards perfection. I can tell you that. So Kelly, is there anything else that you need to say?
No, other than we're going to really continue strengthening that bond with the community and using our community resources. We've had a lot of really great ideas about that as well.
Yeah, keeping open lines of communication and listening and working together is key to all of our work. So next, I would like to introduce Brenda Trogstad, who is the subcommittee leader for operations, transportation, and nutrition. And as we all know, Brenda is the executive director of business and finance, and she's been doing a great job in all respects with all of her responsibilities at hand. So Brenda, do you want to kind of cover some of the things that are pressing within your subcommittee?
Sure. So what our main focus is on our subcommittee is the child nutrition side and then transportation side. So I'm going to start with child nutrition. Catherine Ward is our food service director. She actually is on the OSPI state committee for reopening of schools. So she is hearing firsthand what's changing constantly. She has several meetings a week with them, and we hear the changes regularly on what's happening over there. So that's been really good for our subcommittee. So what is happening, of course, child nutrition is a federal program. So we have a lot of federal guidelines coming down along with the health department guidelines that we're having to adhere to. So what we've done in our subcommittee, and Robert Heron and his crew, he's director of facilities, they went out and set up cafeteria tables for us to try and measure the social distancing. So we would know how many students we could get in the cafeterias for each lunch period. So we've created a chart that shows what we normally serve at lunchtime during that period, just for our lunches we serve, not including what kids eat that bring from home. So that's going to increase it even more. So we have by every school how many students we can put in the cafeteria and safely social distance at the 6 feet apart. We've also discussed how do we get those kids through the lunch line in a good fashion with 6 feet apart. So Robert and his crew are planning to put the 6-foot marks on the floor to try to help us keep them apart, because we discussed who will be monitoring that. So that was another piece that we'll take into account. Everything in the program right now, the way the guidelines are coming out, is it will be grab and go. We won't be cooking things. It'll be prepackaged product. So we'll still be buying all those lunch sacks we've been using currently in the program. The only thing is the program changes. They did this emergency program for the emergency closure where we didn't have to see each student and record them that way, but that goes away because the guidance is that we'll be doing a planned closure if we have to close again. So it changes the rules totally. So we won't be able to go back to what we're doing right now, serving the kids. We actually will have to see every student that comes through there. So we're talking about having cards of some sort that we can just have a scanner and we scan the card to try and speed up those lines a little bit, because we're worried we might have to add some lunches. So the schools will have to be working on that if we get to that point. So with food services, it's pretty flexible. We can build the program. We know it's grab and go. And depending on what Kelly's committee comes up with, we can be pretty flexible quickly with that, is what we're working on. And also if we end up going to strictly distance learning again, like we did at the end of the year, we're hoping they come through with the waivers so we can go back to what we're doing now, but that will require waivers. Otherwise, we will have to see every student and scan every student's card to be able to give them food. Another worry we have, and it will depend on what model we do, is we were discussing on the Monday, Tuesday day of school and the Thursday, Friday, how do you provide meals for those kids the other days of the week that you don't see them? Because in the child nutrition guidelines now, we wouldn't be able to do it. So we're hoping they're applying for some waivers. They're discussing those waivers, but we'll have to wait to see if those come through to be able to provide food the other 3 days a week for those kids. Another interesting piece that happened this week is you hear about the face masks. Our employees in food services won't be allowed to wear cloth face masks. They will have to use disposable. And that was something new that came out of the committee work this week. So that is the child nutrition piece. I don't know if you have questions on that one before I move to transportation.
Any questions, Bob, so far?
Well, there's been a couple comments posted to the YouTube stream that don't necessarily pertain to this immediate topic, but topics that we've covered already, if you want me to read them.
Sure.
All right. Going back to the question regarding PHQ 9, Karen Percy responded, awesome. That will be a good start. Kids are experiencing new traumas. I hope their ACEs scores are not going up. Good counselors would be a huge support. Then we had Diane Hooser. Has childcare been discussed for distance learning days? I don't know whether or not the discussion we just had on childcare answers the question, but there wasn't anything posted beyond that. Wendy Bowles, will a hybrid model be the same across the district?
Bob, can we hold there for a minute? Kelly, do you want to respond to that statement or question?
Dr. Puzzle, can I respond before Kelly responds? Because
Sure.
So this has been a really hot topic on our committee because, right, it goes back to that whole social emotional. I'm a parent myself. Like, if I have to go to work, what am I going to do with my child if they're at home having to be on the computer learning through that continuous learning thing? And it goes back to accessibility, making sure that parents are aware of what supports are out there, whether that's through the district or whether that's through the Mason County community. We want to make sure that that information is accessible. Childcare, the information around a childcare is accessible sooner rather than later. So we want to get that information out soon so parents can start to plan, and and their children's days are predictable, because we know that that's super important. So that's been a hot topic both within Kelly's committee and my committee, and I'm sure maybe in other committees as well. So that is, making that information accessible. We don't know what that's going to look like, but we want to do a one-stop shop. Where can I go to get that information? What supports do I have? And if I have questions, who do I contact? So that, Kelly, if you want to elaborate.
That's 100% what I was going to say, even better, Mary Ann. I really think that the idea is to gather as many resources as we can, constantly working on that, and then also get the initial plan that we have out there as soon as possible, so people can start digesting it, thinking about it, looking at how that would affect them, and then also looking for the resources to support that. I know that we can't wait until 2 weeks before school starts to tell parents, oh, we're going to rotate every other day and you're on Mondays and Wednesdays.
Right.
We're not going to be able to do that. We can't do that. That wouldn't be fair. Wouldn't be okay. So for us to make this decision, get out there, do the legwork that we need to do as far as looking at families, seeing who needs to be on what day so that everybody runs the same schedule. Get that information out there to parents. I really think that that's our first step, and we need to do that as soon as possible.
So I look forward to, within your plans, to make a recommendation on the child care issue. I think that's a very important part in terms of anything that we come up with in terms of instruction or support for our families. That needs to be a component that we work into the recommendation. Absolutely. I mean, we've
So
got,
when we go back to childcare, Dr. Apostle, Jenny Lafreniere, she's done a great job. She worked with me through this shutdown with our essential workers daycare. So I feel like Jenny and I are pros at daycare, but what we do know that was, we had to apply for a waiver to open up that childcare. And right now, and Jenny, you can jump in on this, there is nothing available right now for us to apply for another waiver, but I know Jenny's been on it. She's been looking at this information, researching what are our options. And please know that if something does come available, Jenny and I will work towards making sure that those opportunities are available to our community. But right now, you know, with the childcare and the rules and restrictions around what we have to have in place, that kind of ties our hands. But, you know, it takes a village, and we all know that it takes a village to do this job right. And we look forward to work together. And again, transparency, accessibility, and a one-stop shop of where do I go for information on the needs and the questions that I have.
absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. Jenny, anything that you want to add?
I would just say that because of space issues, the other piece of it would be we would have to have another location. We couldn't do it in any of our schools. So that would be something else to consider should a waiver be granted again.
Yeah, you know, incorporating our community, going out to churches possibly, just doing everything we can as a community to meet this very important need. You know, we've got to really be creative, because I think this is something that the parents are going to need, the families are going to need, regardless of what the model is. So keep that in mind, and I know you are, as we move forward in this regard. Anything else, Brenda?
Well, I could talk about transportation, what
Go ahead.
little bit I have there.
Wasn't there another question that Bob was still reading?
Oh, yes, Wendy. I think Wendy Bowles had a question.
Yes, you did.
Yes, I'm
There's
sorry.
actually there are actually a couple more posts.
Okay.
Wendy Bowles, will a hybrid model be the same across the district, or might it vary from school to school in terms of days meeting?
It will be the same.
Okay,
Yes, we have to have the students and for the families on the same days. So that would include if I had students at, let's say, Mountain View and one at OMS and one at the high school, I would want them all on the same day as a parent so that I knew what days my kids were. So yes, it will be the same across the district.
okay. Thank you. We have one from Diane Hooser. I am continuously impressed with the board being open and communicating with the public, and I appreciate you asking parents what we need through surveys.
We thank you very much for that. And that will continue. I guarantee you that. Well, folks, we've got about 20 minutes. And Brenda, can you please touch on the transportation issue?
Yes, this one will be pretty quick because we still have a lot of moving pieces in it. This one really does stem off of the model that we will be picking. We reviewed the survey. Holly Tucker is our Director of Transportation. And we saw that a lot of parents said they would still continue to use transportation. So what has to happen there is we need to pick our model, and then Holly has to do routing programs and actually put the students in their routes to make all of the pieces work. So she has started assembling that, but we have to wait a little bit longer to figure out what model to really put the pieces in place. Just a few pieces. People will be required to wear face masks on the buses, including the drivers. And if we are social distancing, we're supposed to be social distancing as long as we can on the bus. We don't have to do it the whole time because our routes are not a full day. So, but they recommend you keep the kids apart as long as you can as your bus is filling up. And then we do want to, one of the things we're talking about is actually putting a registration online for parents that want to use the buses. so we can kind of get a count for how many kids to make sure we have enough drivers, have enough buses, and how our routing is going to go. So Holly has formed a subcommittee of the committee with some of her drivers, and they're working on all those pieces behind the scenes right now.
Thank you very much, Brenda. There are a lot of unanswered questions, but you're plowing through it and doing the very best that we can to prepare.
Thank you.
The next subcommittee is the policy review and reform to accommodate a transitional model of education. Well, originally, when I recommended that we have this committee, I thought we could start right away, but I want to wait until we actually have our plan, our school district plan, and then we would come back through with this group of people. Carrie Davidson, one of our board members, will be involved, myself, and there's a few other people that are interested in this policy subcommittee. But we would come through and we would deal with the issues that the subcommittees have brought forward in relation to our plan. We would review at that time our current policy and determine if we needed to modify, change, add, or delete. But even if we do our work within this subcommittee, all of our work would have to go to our attorney to make sure that it was consistent and legal in supporting the plan to reopen schools. So stay tuned on that one. Safety and security, very important piece of our overall plan, obviously, for protecting our students and staff against the virus, protocols for sanitizing and disinfecting our school buildings, system to deal with the reemergence of the virus. It is an all-encompassing subcommittee, and I'm happy with the leadership that we have there with Karen DeWitt and Robert Herron.
Yeah, and it turns out that that was the easy part. It was the committee was determining, things relating to sanitization and cleaning those, because the state's pretty strict on what needs to be done and what frequency. So we're just passing those recommendations through, and those are going to be, relatively easy to adopt and to put into place. It's just really dependent on the instructional model and things that are going on and the frequency and in which the buildings are going to be accessed. The things that turned out to be much more for our committee, that as the information and we went through, things that became more difficult to implement are things more like the required health screenings. So we have, it is required, the state is going to require that there is a screening that happens with every student and every staff member as they enter in the building every day. And so we're still working through the recommendations and logistics for that. But every student and every staff member is going to have their temperature taken, and they're going to have to go through a questionnaire about symptoms and so forth. And so it's quite logistically difficult when you have streams of students coming in the back doors from buses and students coming in from parent drop-offs, and determining whether we have one single point for all this screening that goes on, or if we break it into separate groups. We also have the staff members being tested or not tested, I should say, but screened as they come in the buildings. And then then we have to work through a plan, as we've been discussing, about how to, when we have someone that is rejected, or so to speak, or doesn't meet the criteria through screening. And, the state requires us to send them back for at least 72 hours. And then we're also talking about the reemergence of students and staff, if they should be quarantined, or if they test positive for COVID, or actually sick for a prolonged period of time. And so we're going through all of those scenarios, because we have nurses on our committee. We also have Mason General Hospital and Mason County Health Department and Mason County Emergency Management. So as we're talking about all the different particulars, we're working through that as part of our recommendations, and through that, as well as how to use playground spaces, how to use libraries, for instance. Libraries have books that are very absorbent for moisture and sneezes and germs, and as well as their confined spaces in some regards. We only have so many tables, and we have to maintain social distancing. We're working through signage also, signage throughout our buildings. In all of our hand washing areas, this is how many with just, factoids for people there. So there's constantly being reminded throughout the building when you're entering the building, when you're going to, food service areas, when you're going into restrooms. Here, these are things to keep in mind. Remember to wash your hands. This is how you wash your hands. And then, even though these things may seem obvious, it's really easy to become complacent too. And so without having frequent reminders and, colorful signs and things of that nature, it helps to keep things moving. We were identifying additional hand washing stations are going to be critical in our food service areas. There would be, even though we have bathrooms adjacent to all of our cafeteria spaces and so forth, there would be just the sheer number of students that are coming through that would need to wash their hands before or after meals. The queue for the hand washing would be too great. So we're gonna have to introduce additional hand washing stations. So as we're going through all the different PPE requirements and the planning and how to get students through the building, and all the different scenarios, it's just very complex because as we're building recommendations for every one of these different scenarios, we have guidelines that are constantly changing. So it's amazing how we're trying to keep abreast of all the different guidelines, but every time we have a meeting, someone comes in and said, "Oh, did you see this new guideline?" And so we're sharing it with the group, and we're, let's go make some adjustment here. And then we also have 8 different schools that we're dealing with, and then the ELC as well. So we're also trying to make this, so as we're taking all these different changing guidelines, we're also trying to figure out, is it different for this different school and this different scenario? And then we also have, we're dealing with the different scenarios of what model are we gonna have? Is it all students? Is it a rotating? And also making sure we have plans for a future closure. So it's this pyramid of upside down pyramid where everything's balanced off of some major decisions like our teaching and instruction model that we go for, and this fragile ecosystem and of everything that's built on top of it. And every time we move a core piece at the bottom, we're always chasing back out what all the different changes are. So it's complex. It's very exciting, but but there's just a lot that we're continuing to go through. We've met all the way through the month of June, and we still have 2 more meetings before we prepare our draft plan, which we'll have ready on the 8th.
Thank you, Robert, very much. Robert, maybe I missed this, but did you, I think we've heard where parents are going to be asked to take the temperature of their kids. Did you mention anything about that and what our thinking is in relation to that possibility?
We started to discuss that in our most recent meeting. We've not completed a recommendation at this point. It seems like perhaps a hybrid model might be good for that scenario. At least that's what I'm going to propose to our group. And where that is that, like for instance, the Yelm School District is planning an attestation where the parents can go through, take the temperatures and go through it, answer those questions and Skyward in the morning and send it.
Right.
Well, we know that's not a great solution for everyone because not everyone has internet access or everything, but perhaps we can come up with a blended model where those parents who can or want to provide that attestation daily, and it would have to be every day, that they could submit that, maybe print something out, or it comes in the system. We'd have to work with Terry Hedger and maybe how that could be implemented. And then the other students who are either unable to do that because of connectivity issues or what have you, or just choose not to use that method, could then go through the physical screening method. So it is something we're discussing, but we've not made them. We have to really make the recommendation yet.
Okay, that would be part of your recommendation going forward, that I presume, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Robert. Good work. We have about 10 minutes. And next we have the sports co-curricular PK-12 program, and Trevor Leopold and Mark Smith are the chairs of that committee. Trevor.
Well, first of all, it was when we did the survey, I was really excited to see that a lot of the families said that they went out and they've done activities and athletics to relieve stress and all that other stuff. So moving forward, you're going to see how important activities and athletics are going to be for our kids when they do get back, to combat that. depression and stress and anxiety and everything we have. First of all, we put all of our guidelines together already for the summer and for the returning of practices put together. We have phase 3 and phase 4 already put together. And the first thing what we had to do, and we thought was really important, was I talked to a lot of coaches individually, because when we come back to practice, it's not going to be the same. You're not going to have these huddles, high fives, fist bumps, all that other stuff. It's going to have to be a total game changer of how we run practices for our kids. So that was one of the things that we did. Is I reached out to all the coaches and kind of talked about their individual sport and what a practice would look like, talking to the kids ahead of time before you get to practice. Because what we don't want is we don't want kids to show up in a gym or on a field and they all just stand next to each other and mingle. So the WIAA, as I said before, has come out with July 7th as a date that they're going to submit their guidelines to the OSPI and the health department. That has also been kind of extended a little bit. They might have to have it until July 21st to actually confirm exactly what they're doing for fall sports. One of the things that our committee worked on was, and we were worried about, was registration, because we had the old paper pencil registration where parents had to come in, pick up packets. They had to come to school. And I just want to thank Brenda and Dr. Apostle, because we were able to sign up for a registration program that we can do online now. So we don't have to have parents coming in, standing in line, gathering, and being on campus. Everything can be done online for when we do register kids for athletics. And the registration will be available at the middle school, the junior high, and the high school. So all 3 schools that'll be available at. The other thing, facilities. I'd like to thank Robert for getting us some thermal thermometers so the coaches can check temperatures. He got us hand sanitizer. He's got us over 25 bottles that kids can clean stuff with for when we do have practices, because we're going to have to, the weight room equipment has to be washed down. All the athletic equipment has to be washed down. So for an example, if we're doing a football drill and a kid hits a pad, when that kid's done with the pad, they have to wipe the pad down before another kid can hit it. So all that kind of stuff, I'd just like to thank Robert for putting all that stuff into place. And then is if we split classes where kids come in on certain days, and how would that work with athletics when we have practices after school, when we only have half the kids on campus? Because a lot of our kids don't have that transportation to get to school. If they're at school, they're at school, but if they're not, how would practices work? So that's something that we really need to work on and figure out as soon as we find out exactly what we're doing this school year. It's going to be an interesting conversation how we work those practices in.
Thank you very much, Trevor. And I know you're working very hard and working with your colleagues across the area to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. The question is, are we going to have fall sports? That's what I keep hearing.
I sure hope so. One way or the other, we will. If we have to go with cross country, tennis, golf, those the sports that are low impact and start with, that might be a solution. But right now, I think we're going to go as scheduled, and I haven't heard anything different yet. But if we do, I'll let everybody know right away.
Thank you, Trevor, very much. Okay. Next, our final subcommittee, communications, public relations. Katie Diamond, are you with us? There she is.
I am here. I'll be quick. So we sent out a communication survey recently to our families, and our committee met up and we went through those results. Some of the things that stood out to us were that our English speaking and non-English speaking families have different preferred methods of communication. Let's see, another thing that stood out was some families who have kids in multiple schools felt over communicated with, which was interesting, which that can come from different phone calls directly from the school and then communications from the district. So that's something the committee was looking at. We started brainstorming ideas on how we can better our communications and to make sure we can reach all of our families. Moving forward, we're going to stick to the most preferred methods of communication for our English speaking families and as well as our non-speaking English families. They're a little bit different there. So we'll tweak how we communicate with all of our families that way. We're going to work on keeping messages short and to the point. Some of the comments were that phone calls can be very lengthy and families were not a fan of that. So just getting directly to the point with our communications. We also talked about utilizing Google Classroom so we can reach more students and families for more widespread messages. Another new resource to us, which is pretty cool, is the new Resources on Wheels, or ROW, which Ricardo's been helping run. And we started using that for some of our communications towards the end of the year once it was up and running. So we're going to utilize that more, and our families have been responding really well to it. And then if necessary, we will continue with hard copies at our meal sites and packet pickups, depending on how school looks in the fall. Let's see, next year, we talked about having another web page set up. It'll be similar to what we have set up currently. I kind of made a hub on our website for everything COVID related. So we'll have a web page like that next year where families can always refer to get the information they need. And also to have quick reference sheets. I know a lot of families were saying they were looking or having a hard time finding who to contact and where. So we'll have that information posted readily and available so people can find that information easily. As always, we'll see what works and adapt as needed. And a lot of our work is going to start after July 8th as we prepare to share our plans by July 15th. So that is where we are at right now.
Thank you very much, Katie. And Katie does an excellent job communicating with our public and with our staff. And it sounds to me that we're going to be very adaptable as we move forward in terms of how we're going to communicate. But we have put a priority on making sure that we are communicating with all of our families and our staff and our students and our community in general. So thank you to you and the subcommittee, Katie, for all your efforts. Well, folks, are there any other questions, Bob?
I think you have, let's try that again. I think you have a question from the public member.
Okay. What is the question?
Hi, this is Kim Goldsby.
Yes? I'm not hearing the question. Bob, can you help us with that?
It appears to be from Kim Goldsby, and she's unmuted, so I'm not sure why we are not hearing her.
Yeah, I'm not hearing anything at all. Okay, we'll have to get back to Kim and she can ask the question and I'll get back to her, whatever the question might be. But that concludes our open forum. We ran a little over. It's 7:33. We did very well though, and I appreciate everybody's attendance and welcome you to our next open forum, which will be in mid-July, where we will reveal our plan to reopen school and we will review our budget. We'll have all the information hopefully by then. If not, we will still update you on where we are with the budget. Thank you and have a nice evening.